Hey, Kevin Inoue here once again from Fight Designer LLC with another episode of PewTube. Now, sorry, I've been falling a little bit behind. It's that whole end of the semester thing. Those of you who are academics, you'll get it. As well as having a number of shows going on, things like that. It's been busy. Busy is good. But I did want to throw some more out here. One of the things that I've been wanting to kind of get out here is a little bit of talk about reloads, because this is kind of one of those pet peeves that we hear a lot about when watching action movies and things like that, is the very selective use of reloads, or that they never do reloads. Because in part, it's one of those things that takes practice. It's kind of hard to fake, and if you really haven't done it much, it'll show. You'll be fumbling around, especially when you get nervous. I mean, I do it sometimes still too. I am not the world's best tactical firearms handler. But it can be a fun thing to play with and to practice, and it can certainly help with that level of realism and believability, and showing that your character has put in the hours to be highly trained when we're supposed to come across that way. So, our basic categories here, we'll have sort of our administrative reload, which is what we're used to at the firing range, where you can kind of stop and put it down, you know, and you get a little bench there by the shooting range, and you can look down, mess with stuff. The problem is in combat, which tends to be when we're using these things in movies. If I look down while I am doing this, by the time I look back up, the person I was engaged in a firefight with might not be there anymore, and they might be somewhere else where they're going to get me before I figure out where the heck they are. So I need to stay aware of my surroundings. Situational awareness is obviously a tactical priority for any kind of firefight. So there's a problem with looking down and fidgeting with stuff down here. Part of that can be solved by just having stuff in your muscle memory, enough that you can find it, you know where you keep your gear, you're consistent enough on that you can find it without having to look. There's some of that proprioceptive sense of knowing where your hand is. If it's a handgun, being able to find that place on the heel of your own hand, to be able to find that. You can get flared magazine wells and things like that that'll help. Making sure that your magazines are lined up correctly so that when you reach for one, it's not backwards, you don't have to fidget with it. But presetting all that stuff in the right place is also huge, to be able to grab it and go and not feel stupid because you're trying to put the magazine in backwards. Part of it, though, is also just kind of where you hold it, your operating space, as it were, right? So if I keep it in my workspace up here, even as I am doing the reload, I can still have some of that situational awareness. Now, even if I have to cheat and focus a little bit in front of me, I'll still at least detect motion downrange. So that's kind of one of the things that you'll see a lot more these days. Now, for camera work, if you want to be able to see your performer's face, you have to cheat that off to a diagonal a little bit, so we can see them watching, but we can actually still see their face. Obviously, if I'm doing that while facing the camera, I'm going to be hiding my face, which, unless you're stunt doubling somebody, is probably not what you want to do. But that can certainly be one way of addressing those issues. Now there's, options also just depending on the story we're trying to tell. If I am not completely out of ammo, maybe I want to just top things off before I go to the next room. I might not have totally used up all 30 rounds that are in this magazine, but I don't know what's around that next corner. And I might need all 30 rounds, and I might only have 5 or 6 left in this one. So maybe I pull this out, and this is where it can be nice to have what we call a dump pouch. So it's where you put things that are used that you need to drop quickly, but not just leave behind you. You don't want to grab it thinking it's a fresh magazine, but you also don't want to just leave it, because if you do start to run out, you might need those extra 5 rounds in that magazine. So being able to eject that, put the partially spent magazine in the dump pouch, grab a fresh one, top it off. You don't have to cycle the action or anything to rechamber a new round, because there's already a round in the chamber. Some firearms will fire with a round in the chamber and the magazine ejected, some will not. So that's kind of something you have to research ahead of time, or sometimes it'll say on the side of the frame even, or in the manual. So you may or may not be able to still fire while you're in the midst of that magazine change, but at least you've got that awareness while it's going on, and there's still one there should you need it. Sometimes you want to minimize that change over time, so I might not want to eject one and then fumble around for a fresh one. I might want to make sure I have that fresh one ready, in which case I'm holding one in my offhand while I bring it up, and then I just do a quick switch with them side by side. Now they make magazine couplers and things like that. Some people will even just duct tape them together so that you can just switch one right over, but that means you're carrying 2 full magazines for a while up there, and these things get heavy once they're loaded. So that's not always ideal just to have a bunch of magazines strapped together or whatever. But this essentially does that with my fingers. It just puts those right next to each other. So it's an easy switch, and then the other one I can stick in that dump pouch or stick in a pocket or something. On the other hand, sometimes I am in the middle of a firefight, and I don't care what I do with that magazine. I just need to get this thing up and running so I can sling more lead down range now, because somebody is trying to kill me, and I need to stop them right away. So then we get into this sort of full-on combat reload, which has gotten really popular in Hollywood now, where you just drop that magazine. Sometimes, if the magazine sticks a bit, giving your firearm a little bit of a rotational flick, that centrifugal force will send it flying off a little bit faster, eject it a little bit more vigorously, just to make sure that it's clear. Gives you that nice little twitch. And then you can bring the new one up, slam it home, and then either, sometimes you have a bolt release you can use on the side of for example, an AR-15 or an M4. Sometimes you gotta cycle the action. If it's a jam, you're probably needing to slide to operate the full slide or the bolt to make sure you're clearing anything. But if you were totally out, you probably have a slide release or a bolt release that you can hit that'll be a little faster. So this is also a question of, do I want the larger playable action, or do I want the faster action to look a little more slick? I know some people who are not a fan of using the slide release just because they don't trust it enough, or it's a more fine motor kind of thing and you might miss and fumble around for it, especially if you're wearing tactical gloves that aren't the best fit because the wardrobe was kind of one size fits all. I don't know, it happens. So totally up to you what you do on that. But as a gun wrangler, I do have to say, ask before you do that. Don't just assume that you can throw these magazines onto a cement floor and nobody will care. Especially if you're doing something with like a gas blowback M4. Those magazines are kind of fragile and they're a pain in the butt. They're kind of expensive, you know? You're gonna be spending 40 bucks or something for a decent M4 gas blowback magazine. So if you go flinging that across the thing and break it, if we're lucky and smart and have enough money, I probably have some extras and we can keep going with the shoot. But you can only do that so many times before it's like, I got nothing left and you've just broken all of our magazines. There are some things you can do to help with that, magazine base plates, or even just these little Ranger poles, the little rubber poles there. Things like that can help pad it a little bit. But also, you know, if it's a decently tight frame, as a gun wrangler, if I have a mat handy, if I'm also there doing other stunt stuff or fight stuff, or if I can talk to the stunt coordinator and just be like, can we put down even just a blanket, like a moving blanket? If you can put that out of frame and try and have them drop the magazine there, or if they're just dropping it loose, just step below them. As long as it's out of frame, it'll pad that impact and it'll save your gear a lot of wear and tear. So I definitely think that's worth planning out if you want to do one of those. If you're on grass, doesn't really matter. Just make sure there's somebody watching to see where the darn thing goes, so you don't have to hold up shooting for a half hour while everybody goes around on hands and knees and tries to find that magazine without trampling all the greenery. You know, it can be a very nice dynamic action, especially if it's in like slow motion or something, in which case, of course, you got to make sure that the magazines look real and they're not gas blowback magazines that are obviously gas blowback on the top, or you know, empty magazines that don't have any actual dummy rounds in the top to look like they're loaded, anything like that. It's a problem with slow motion, or even crimp blanks. You can kind of see the difference if it's slow enough as it comes in. Full speed, no one's going to see as you slam that home. If there's a little glint of something shiny, good enough. So that's kind of the most extreme version, would be that combat reload there. Now I guess the other option though is that if you don't have more ammunition for that firearm, or if it's just jammed up and you don't have time to clear it, then there's also what is colloquially referred to as the New York reload, which is drop that gun, pull another one, go for your backup gun. And so if you have a backup gun, if you are using your rifle or your shotgun, just drop that. Hopefully you've got a sling, so it'll just drop right along your center there. Draw your sidearm, fire a few rounds there, and then you can come back to the carbine or the rifle later when you've got a chance. So that's a thing you see happen a lot in modern tactical stuff. That transitioning between the rifle and the sidearm is a very popular drill for the sort of, I don't know, tactical mall ninjas to practice in their free time. And then, of course, what was the Boondock Saints? Boondock Saints has probably one of the best examples of the New York reload, where the father figure comes on at the end with a handgun in each hand, and when those are empty, he throws those down, and he's got a whole vest full of backups, and he can pull another two and empty those, throws it down, pull another two. And, you know, for that matter, why throw it on the ground? Maybe throw it at them. There's that great thing from the old, like, 1950s Superman, where the bad guys shoot him with a revolver a couple times, and he just kind of stands there and takes it, and the bullets bounce off him, And then the bad guy throws the empty revolver at him and he ducks. Because the bullets were fake and they don't hurt. But the revolver, that would actually hurt to get hit in the head with. But it does kind of make you wonder how these superpowers are supposed to work for Superman. Anyway, I digress. Shotguns and rifles that are not magazine fed, or just are not semi-automatic, put it that way. So if you have a bolt action rifle, I wish I could find my rounds for my APS M50. I packed them up somewhere because somebody rented the rifle and didn't need it, but they look better. But this one's the Super 9 Airsoft shell ejecting, uses these little plastic casings, and a rotary box mag, sort of like you might find in some of the 1022s. So these magazines, they work, but they're not at all fast to get in and out. It's a pain in the butt. You're not going to be able to do that in a way that looks slick, trust me. But, the other thing is, once you've used up all the rounds in the magazine, if it's not trying to already feed one from there, the other thing you can do is just drop one in the top, load them one at a time that way. So it's not hard to do that. With this, I wouldn't with this gun just because it looks kind of chintzy. But, if I were using blanks in my real 30-06 or something like that, yeah, there's a magazine underneath, or if I needed to, I could just pop one in the top if I just need one more shot and I'm in a hurry and I don't want to stop and eject the magazine and load the magazine and reinsert the magazine. I can just drop one in the top. Pump shotguns are kind of similar, and these are really popular in film because they don't require any adaptation. This particular one is one of those PPS Airsoft M870s. So based on the Remington 870 with a tactical setup, but it's a shell ejecting airsoft. This one I haven't gotten around to taking the orange off the barrel, but one of these days I will. But it's a nice, safe way to practice some of this. So same thing, I can always top it off by loading through the bottom here. There's this little loading gate on the bottom. So anytime I need to, I can pull shells off of a bandolier or a shell carrier on my belt or a shell belt or something like that. And I can just pop them underneath here and I can keep topping off that tube magazine whenever I have a free second. But once that's out, if I want something a little faster, because if I load them in there, then I also have to go back and forward again with the pump action. But if I'm in a super hurry and I have an empty chamber, I know I have an empty chamber and I need to get that shot off, I can pull one out, reach over the top here and drop it in over the side. And then just as the pump action is put forward again, it'll chamber that round. So that can be the fastest way to go ahead and top that, and not top it off. That can be the fastest way to go ahead and add one round for that quick shot that you need in a hurry. And you've seen these, John Wick does these. Keanu Reeves got really good at this training with the 3-gun matches with Theatrical. But this is a popular kind of reload as well because these guns are so popular. So as with the bolt action, you can always feed them in one at a time. When the action is open and just drop them in there. That also works with the lever action, incidentally. Or with the semi-automatic. If you don't want to load through the magazine, if you have a loose round, rather than eject the magazine, put it in the magazine, load the magazine, rack the slide. If you find one loose round and your gun is empty, just drop it in on the top there, release the slide release or rack the action, and it'll be able to fire that one round. So that's nice for that quick, dramatic, desperate reload that happens later on in the fight once the ammo is more gone, or if you're fighting over that last round of ammo. 2 guns, 1 bullet rattling around on the table between the 2 of you. Who's going to find that round of ammo and be able to chamber it first? Who knows, right? So those are some options. I love this as one of the forms of sort of business that we have with our props, our actor business, the things that we can do. It grounds it in reality. It shows that there's some skill involved and not just the, pull a trigger, it goes bang, they fall dead. We can't show as much the skill in aiming, but we can show the skill in how we manipulate our props and we interact with them. Reloading is one of the best ways to do that. So, I hope you found this interesting. All of this stuff, like I said, takes practice, and obviously if you're messing around with real guns, with your live guns, make sure you're not doing anything stupid. A lot of accidents that happen with firearms happen while people are manipulating them outside of the range and don't expect it to be loaded. So, make sure that you have no live ammunition in any of your magazines. If you want dummy rounds, get snap caps that are obviously snap caps and you know that they're not real for this kind of training. Always make sure the action is clear before you try and mess around with any of this stuff. As always, play safe, be safe, look good, have fun, and comment, like, subscribe, request, let me know what you want to see, what you want to hear. I'm here for you, and hopefully I'll be able to keep up the weekly schedule again as we wrap up this semester. And if not, know that it's for a good cause because I've got either shows that I'm working on or I'm trying to get my second book freaking finished because I'm behind schedule on that now. So until next time, I'm Kevin Inoue signing off.